I'm Ablash Nagudi. I am a PhD student at the Conley-Morse Center for the Unknown, and I will be talking about explanations in computational neuroscience and category theoretical framework to study dynamical systems. An explanation can be considered to have two main ingredients: the explanandum phenomenon, for which we'll be considering any kind of temporal dynamics in the brain, like the action potential or synchronization of neurons, or a decision being made. A second, we will be looking at the explanans, which can be any kind of dynamical system. And which dynamical systems will be considered explanatory will be determined by their empirical adequacy, and for which we'll be considering a structural approach, to which I'll be coming back in a second. Which models we select as explanatory can be either done through the simulatory approach, which will be basically determined by fitting an ODE by gradient descent or by regression. But in this case, we'll be proposing a structural approach through the so-called Conley index, which summarizes the behavior of a dynamical system. And we will be considering a category theoretical framework to determine the logical spaces of the explanans and the explanandum phenomena. So a very quick visual introduction to the Conley index. If we have a vector field of some kind of dynamical system, we can basically analyze its behavior in terms of its invariant set by looking at this vector field around the invariant set. So for this, we will be first defining an isolated neighborhood, which in this case is, for example, given by this black box. And on this, on the boundary of this, we can identify the so-called exit set, here shown in red. And these two together, the isolating neighborhood N and exit set L, will be giving us the homological Conley index, which is given by the relative singular homology of this index pair. So in this example, this will be given by the graded abelian algebra, which is Z at level 1 and 0 otherwise. Another approach to, one way to kind of summarize the behavior of any kind of dynamical system is the Morse decomposition, which can be represented by the by some kind of directed acyclic graph, which will be given by a set of vertices, which are basically giving the reference sets, which can be anything like a fixed point or a limit cycle, and the edges, which are the connecting orbits between these reference sets. And we can combine these two, the Conley index and the Morse graph, into Conley-Morse graphs, in which the vertices are Conley indices of these recurrent sets. And these Conley-Morse graphs basically summarize the dynamics of the system, at least at infinite time. And we can not only look at them analytically, but also through computational means, for which we can use any kind of time series data, either from computational models, integrated ordinary differential equations, or from real physical systems from which we have collected data. And so we will be then representing the explanandum as the category of Conley-Morse graphs, which are basically have objects as the acyclic directed graphs of graded abelian groups, and in which we'll consider the morphisms just to be the identity morphisms. And we will represent the explanans as the category of local flows, in which we have the objects local flows, which is basically flows only defined on a certain domain, and we will consider as morphisms topological explanans to kind of group together all the models that have that are all in the same way, empirically adequate to the temporal explanandum that we consider. And we can get from the models to the phenomena by defining a functor, from the local flows to the Conley-Morse graphs, which we consider to be giving the Conley-Morse graph of the maximally invariant set of the domain X of our local flow. And we will be just mapping the morphisms in local flows to the identimorphisms in the category of Conley-Morse graphs. And this is the picture of this. So we have as a logical space some kind of family of models that are mapped to different Conley-Morse graphs in our logical space of the explanandum phenomenon. And in this case, we can then consider an explanation to be of some kind of temporal process that is represented by a Conley-Morse graph Y. To exist if the hypothesized models of it A basically give a non-empty intersection. If we take this functor on A intersected with the Conley-Morse graph Y. And we can consider the set of these models of a temporal process to be the inverse functor of this Conley-Morse graph Y. And so finally, we can consider explanans and explanandum represented in these categories, which allows us to select empirically adequate models. And this construct allows us to identify explanations of temporal dynamical systems. Thank you. I'm looking forward to your questions.